If you don't put your ideas out there, other people can't add value to them. They also maybe can't steal them, but more importantly, they can't add value to them. And I was never afraid of that. People can't steal what's in your heart. You know, they maybe can take some of your ideas that they see in the public domain, but they can't steal what's in your heart. And that really was what I knew I was creating, was a company with heart that would care about its associates, that would care about its customers, that would contribute back to the community. I didn't need more. I had a successful career, as you said. My husband and I both had enough. It wasn't that we wanted more. We wanted to be able to do more for the good of the world and the community. And that was really what Build-A-Bear was meant to be for us.
Podcasting from Boulder, Colorado. This is the Baby Got Backstory podcast, where we dive into the story behind the story of today's most inspiring storytellers, creators, and entrepreneurs. I like big backstories, and I cannot lie. I am your host, Mark Gutman. So what do department stores, teddy bears, and a child's eyes have to do with building a billion-dollar brand? Well, in the case of Maxine Clark, the founder of Build-A-Bear Workshop, just about everything. I'm Mark Gutman, and on today's episode of Baby Got Backstory, how a visionary woman started one of America's most recognizable brands at the age of 48 and built a billion-dollar company based on hugs and love. Before we get to today's show, I want to deliver a heartfelt thank you to you, the audience. I feel so lucky to be doing something I love and that is appreciated by you, the listener. If I could just do this show for a living, I would. But until then, we'll keep doing it because, as Marie Kondo says, it sparks joy. Oh, so much joy. And I want to thank you for taking the time to listen and absorb these amazing stories. I truly believe that stories shape our world, and that the very best way we can connect with our fellow humans, find meaning in this crazy thing we call life, is through stories. But even more, when we are invited into someone else's story, it has this amazing effect. Just like when we travel to foreign lands and realize that those people across the globe that we thought were so different, so weird, that don't agree with us, perhaps we think they're evil or that they're against our way of life or strange or different, we find they're just like us and that we have so much in common. And that bonds us as humans, delivers empathy to our fellow humans, and makes the world right again. Now, if you like and enjoy the show, please take a minute or two to rate and review us over at iTunes. iTunes uses these as part of the algorithm that determines ratings on the Apple charts, and ratings help us to build an audience, which in turn then helps us to continue to produce this show. And lastly, this show is all about creating value for you, as well as opening up a dialogue. And I realize I'm doing all the talking, but please, let's start the conversation. I am at Mark Gutman on Facebook, Insta, LinkedIn, and you can always send an email to podcast@wildstory.com with your thoughts and comments. If you have any great ideas for guests, please let me know. It's always better if you know or have a connection to the person you're recommending, but any suggestion is welcome, no matter how crazy. Let's shoot for the stars here. I want to hear who you want to hear. And now, on to today's show. I really don't even know how to intro today's guest. All that comes to mind is that she's amazing, inspiring, captivating, energizing, loving, visionary. The person who introduced us once gave me the best compliment I have ever received. He said, "Mark, you're a faucet, not a drain." And I think that this applies to Maxine Clark 10 times over. She's a faucet, a giver. And as I get older every year and wonder if my best years are behind me, Maxine is pure inspiration. I mean, she started a huge company at the age of 48 and continues to do amazing things for the entrepreneur community in her hometown of St. Louis. She is a role model for all of us. Maxine's an amazing woman, a trailblazer in business, and someone who was the first in many of firsts. She rose up through the ranks of May department stores to become the president of Payless Shoe Source, and these were two of the biggest brands in shopping malls at the time. I want you to think back. The year is 1997, and the first Build-A-Bear workshop opens. And as Maxine tells it, it was like lightning in a bottle. It is the apex of the shopping mall. The internet and e-commerce has yet to become a primary way of shopping. Most businesses don't even have websites or e-commerce sites. Microsoft has just released Internet Explorer 4. Leonardo DiCaprio is flying on the bow of the Titanic with Kate Winslet. And Hanson's MMMBop is a hit, and it's only relevant because they were the boy band of the shopping mall. This is an origin story of one of the most recognizable brands from every shopping mall in America. And just about any kid under the age of 12 knows about Build-A-Bear, and there's something magical about the experience. And if you've ever been to a Build-A-Bear, you know what I'm talking about. For years, my parents, my kids' grandparents, would celebrate birthdays with trips to Build-A-Bear. It's where you go to have an experience or celebrate something special. It's transformative and so much more than just acquiring a teddy bear. It's an expression of love. When you meet Maxine, she's 4 foot 10 inches tall, but lights up the room as if she's 7 feet tall. She's full of life. She's vibrant, sage, and full of wisdom. I found myself hanging on every word she says. I couldn't get enough. And Maxine is a true visionary who can see what she wants and enlist others to help her execute on her vision. And here is the story of Build-A-Bear Workshop. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did.
Maxine, you've had an amazing career, and you're not even close to being done yet. You've risen through the ranks at May & Company. You were president of Payless Shoe Source. That is always hard for me to say. And of course, you're known as the founder, the CEB, or the Chief Executive Bear of Build-A-Bear Workshop. And now you're spending your time focused on supporting the entrepreneurial ecosystem, as well as the early childhood education efforts in your hometown of St. Louis. You sit on a lot of boards for some big companies. We'll get to all of that in just a little bit. But you have this book, and you devote a whole chapter in your book, and it's called The Bare Necessities of Business. And I'm sure we'll talk about that today. And in this chapter, you talk about how it's so important to learn from the experience of others. And so that is my goal for this episode. And so to start, I'd like to go back to the beginning. Did you know at an early age you were destined to become the Chief Executive Bear?
Well, the only signal that I would have had about being the future Chief Executive Bear would have been my love of my teddy bear, Teddy. And I lost him when I was 10 years old. And little did I know I would be reacquainted with him hundreds of millions of times over through the teddy bears made in our store. No, I was a very ambitious person. My father was a business person. My mother was a social worker. And I wanted to be a lawyer, a civil rights attorney. So I went to college, majored in journalism and storytelling, if you will. And I went off to law school and needed a job and ended up going to work at the May department stores in their head company division in Washington, and took a leave of absence from law school because I love the work, and I'm still on that leave of absence.
And so is this the same Teddy that you dedicate your book to?
Yes.
Oh, and so tell me about Teddy. Like, you dedicate your book to him, and you mention him, and it sounds like he was pretty impactful in your life. Tell me a little bit about Teddy.
He went with me everywhere, and I told my deepest, darkest secrets to him. And when I was 10 years old, I went out to dinner with my family and our next door neighbors. And while I was in the restaurant, I found this out when I was my 40th birthday, my dad took my teddy bear away from me because I used to suck my thumb, and he wanted me to stop doing that. And he thought if he took my teddy bear away, I would stop. So it was quite a traumatic experience. But I figured it out long before my father told me that that's what had happened. And I wasn't mad at him. I recovered. But I always loved stuffed animals, and I always was on the lookout. When I saw a child holding their stuffed animal and they were like about to lose it, I would, say, don't lose that. I always had a special place in my heart. But Teddy he's always with me. I remember what he looked like. He was a brown bear, even though by the time I lost him, he was a small part of his original self because he was much loved and hugged.
And was that what the base Build-A-Bear was based off of, Teddy? Was he the sort of prototype for that?
There was a bear in our first collection. We had many animals. We had about 25. Not all bears, but there was a bear that I thought represented him. But actually, one of the bears we had was the idea for Build-A-Bear actually came from one of my friends who was 10 years old when we were looking for Beanie Babies. And when we couldn't find the one that we wanted, Katie suggested that they were so easy we could make them. And her bear's name was George. And she also almost lost her teddy bear on a vacation trip in Colorado. And so we had that in common. That was one of those bonds. And I always looked after George when she went on vacation. And her brother's bear, Teddy, when he went away to college, he asked me to take care of him, and he's still at my house.
I love that story. And so you were growing up, and did you grow up in St. Louis?
No, I grew up in Coral Gables, Florida.
Okay, yeah. And so you grew up in Coral Gables, and you go to school in Georgia, I believe, mm-hmm. and you're going to be a lawyer, an attorney, probably civil rights, and you're going to make a big impact. And you have this opportunity to go into retail as a trainee at the May & Company. And I'd love to hear about that decision and what kind of drew you to that. But before you get into that, or in addition to that, I'd like you to set the stage of what retail was like then, because certainly very different from what we see today. And just to give us a little baseline of kind of what that retail experience was like.
Well, retailing was very local. All across the country, there were local specialty stores, local department stores, and they were just starting to become more national. The May Company was a conglomerate of department stores. Some were called May Company, some were called Head Company. In St. Louis, it was Famous Bar. And they bought up a series of department store, family-owned department stores, and put them together. And there was Federated Department Stores. It was out of Cincinnati. Similarly, they had Burdines and Filene's and many stores across the country. And so that was the phase we were in the early 70s, was corporate-owned department stores, still with their local names. And the specialty stores were usually very local, like somebody opened up a dress shop, or somebody opened a shoe store, or somebody opened a clothing store in a local city. And eventually, there were a few national chains. Actually, out of St. Louis, was Edison Brothers had owned several chains of different shoe stores, and they also started buying up these apparel chains and created national specialty stores for mostly in teen apparel, young person's apparel. So it was just starting. Les Wexner, I believe, started the Limited in 1975 with one store in Columbus, Ohio, and the rest is history. So we were at the beginning of this expansion of the mall and the expansion of specialty stores and the demise of downtown shopping areas. People had moved to the suburbs, and the suburbs were growing, and retailing was all about the mall. And these incredible malls were being built all over the country, and there was a new place for everybody to open up a store. It was a plug-and-play format. That's what I call it. That's why it's so successful. Anybody could open a store in a mall and sort of build their store into that space, and open the doors and turn on the lights and have a business. And that is how the mall business really developed. The first mall, I think, was in Edina, Minnesota, right outside of Minneapolis in 1956. And a slow change. We had our mall in Miami. Was a big mall near Gayland. Again, was twice the size now that it was when I was growing up. It was an open air mall, became a closed mall. But mostly there was these areas that you would shop in, sort of semi-downtown shopping areas. And those were just, now they're hardly in existence.
Yeah. And it's changed quite a bit. And I almost, like, as you were talking, it made me think of, like, it's kind of like the original internet, the way the mall was this curated, we'll bring you the customers. You just have to bring us the business and your idea. And like you said, it was turnkey, and you could open up a shop, and, theoretically you'd have a stream of customers coming by, and hopefully they'd be interested in what you had to offer. What attracted you to retail? So, you mentioned you were on this path to be an attorney, and, you kind of went up to DC to take a retail training job. And what I'm inferring is that wasn't really the plan to stay there, that you were going to maybe go check that out and come back to the path of being an attorney, but you got kind of caught up in it. Like, what was attractive about that?
Well, when I was in high school, I was the editor of my high school newspaper, and I had to go out and sell advertising and not only, lay out and put the newspaper together. And I love that. And that's kind of retailing, and you have to sell something, and somebody has to buy it. So we had to sell advertising. We had to create formats within our newspaper that students would buy. But also I had great teachers. And in college, I had a great marketing professor, great advertising and PR, and also marketing. And one of my professors worked for the W.T. Grant Company, which doesn't exist today. And he did consulting for them, and he allowed me to participate in some of the projects. And he said to me one day, he said, you'd be great in retailing. They need people like you. You have a lot of curiosity. You're really interested. And so when I went to DC to go to school, I also went to see if there were jobs in the local department stores that I could work in. And they had these executive training programs. The Heck Company, which was part of May Company, had one in Woodward, and Lothrop, which is the other department store that was more local. They had one also. And so I applied to all of them, and the Heck Company hired me. And fortunately, well, it was an unfortunate story, but it was good for me. My boss got sick and had to take a leave of absence. And I was just a few months in the job, and they needed me to do everything that he did. And my boss, which was the merchandise manager, he was the buyer, but the merchandise manager that he reported to, so don't worry about anything. Don't panic. We'll show you. So for about 6 months, I did this job that I wasn't really qualified to do, but I had my boss's boss teaching me, and I traveled and went to New York, went to buy, and I loved it. And as soon as he came back, they promoted me to be a buyer because I'd done such a good job. So I was sort of off and running. I had this big paycheck, not really so big, but it seemed big to me at the time. And I was starting to travel for the company and asked to do some major projects, and got exposure to the top people in the company, and then eventually to the top CEO of the May Company when he came to visit. And then I got a chance to move to St. Louis to work for him. So it just sort of, the journey is far better than the destination. And you just take a right turn, and maybe you'll take a left turn back, or you'll just keep going. I kept going, and each chapter just got bigger and better. But it started with my marketing professor in college, even teaching us what retailing was about. I was a good shopper. I didn't always have so much money. I loved to window shop and loved to go into stores, and I always have been curious. So it played to my curiosity. It also played to I was the right person at the right time. This was 1971 when I started working and doing this job. And it was when working women were, new to the marketplace and needed everything. And so I could, as a sportswear buyer, apparel buyer, I was the customer. So I just really was able to know pretty firsthand what the customer was looking for. I had good instincts about that.
And it really strikes me in reading your material and hearing, and sitting and talking with you previously, that you really are a big believer and about setting a strong vision. And you kind of talked about, hey, I have this vision even to be an attorney. But at the same time, I get the sense, and I'd love to get your take on this, that you're not a slave to that vision. You're not so myopic that you're not like, hey, if another great opportunity presents itself, I will alter that vision.
Yes, that's definitely true. I think it's my curiosity. That's my superpower. I am very curious about everything. I'm nosy, and I'm proud of it. And I just want to keep learning. I think that's been my strength always. I never thought, I also know what I don't know, and there's no shame in that. That's just the opportunity to learn more. So that's really what being a consumer-oriented person is finding out always what the customer is looking for. And I love to look at reports that put the customer in front of you, and you can tell from what they bought else besides if they bought this makeup and this clothing brand and these shoes, what they generally liked. And I can create in my head a vision of who that target customer was. So I have a very visual mind. I can see things and I can sometimes sketch them out, but mostly I can see them really clearly in my head, enough that I can bring it back to my memory so I can, execute to that design. And then because I'm a good storyteller, I can tell it to other people who can help me execute it. So that's what I was able to do with my training from the May Company. When I had the idea for Build-A-Bear, I could explain it to somebody else who could design the store and who could help me design the animals and all the things that go with it. I didn't have to do it all myself. I could share that with others, and that was definitely a gift that I have. But I don't know everything, and I don't even want to know everything. I want to continually be able to learn and to grow, and that's where new ideas and new trends come in, to be, and then you have to react to those. And so I'm always out on the cutting edge.
Yeah. And, and I don't want to gloss over your time at May Company, because we're making it sound like it was, 2 seconds. But I mean, you had a very long career there in a time when, that was a little more common. And then I believe you spent 19 years there. And not only is it about just staying at the company, you really matriculated through the company. You started as a trainee, but you came up through the organization and you learned and you continued to grow and take on more responsibility. Can you just give us a little bit of a sense of what that path looked like and kind of where you ended up after those 19 years?
It was a wonderful experience. And one of the great things about the retail industry is it's very results oriented. So there really weren't in the Heck Company in Washington, D.C., which was a division of the May Company, there weren't many women that were higher than me for sure. There were other women buyers, but there really weren't women in management positions. So all of my models were men. And I had gotten great results, and that's what they noticed. And so when they had a buyer of the month or the buyer of the year, it was me. because my results were outstanding. So I was measured by my results, not that I was a woman or I was 4'10" or I was 22 years old or whatever the age I was at the time. I was measured on the results. And then I had an opportunity to move to St. Louis to work for the CEO of the May Company, which was a great experience. I really never been to St. Louis. I didn't know anything about St. Louis. I thought I would be here for a couple of years. And within the corporate structure of the May Company, which was based in St. Louis, there was the May Company corporate office. There was Famous Bar, which was one of their best department stores in the country. And they also had a division called Venture Stores, which was their discount division, similar to a Target stores. And so I got to move through all of those locations as a senior executive. So they were all promotions depending on how you looked at the job. And also Payless Shoe Source was part of the May Company. When I was in the corporate staff in St. Louis in 1979, I worked on the acquisition team for the May Company to buy Payless Shoe Source. So when I got selected to be the president of that company in 1992, it was like the family business. It was sort of something I never really thought about because it was in Topeka, Kansas, and I was in St. Louis, Missouri. But I love that business. I got to know it well during the acquisition time and do the due diligence, and I felt like it was my business. And then in 1996, the May Company spun it off as a separate company, and I was able to sort of, take my money and run and come back to St. Louis and decide what I wanted to do. And I didn't want to work. I knew the internet was coming, and I could tell you, how little May Company was technologically savvy. It wasn't very technology savvy. I knew that technology was out there, and I wanted to get involved in a business that had a technology base. And a lot of people were calling me to come work for them, but I didn't really want to work for anybody else. I thought that there was a place where I didn't know what it was at the time when I left, but I knew there was a place where these would come together. And they didn't necessarily have to come together and thinking of it's a business on a screen. But how could you use technology to create a better customer experience? So since we were starting in 1997, we didn't have any legacy systems or any of those old things that people had in technology. We had to be able to create our own. And I knew May Company had very good sales tracking systems. I wanted the best sales tracking system, I wanted the best accounting system. And I was willing to pay for it because I knew that those were things I didn't know. And I didn't want to spend my time doing them by hand. I wanted to be able to use technology. So from the day we started our company, we had pretty amazing systems, but we also had a website. So when we started in 1996, we had built our first Build-A-Bear store at the St. Louis Galleria in St. Louis, Missouri. And we had our web store at buildabear.com. And we were immediately getting inquiries the day after we opened. People were already going online, finding out if we were a franchise, writing us notes, finding out our hours, where was our store located in the mall. We only had one store, but the news was spreading fast, and we fortunately had the smarts to have a website from day one, even though nobody else really had a website. And Macy's didn't even have a website. May Company didn't have a website. And so we were able to really start, really from the beginning. We weren't locked into any historical technology systems.
Yeah, and I want to just take a pause here because I want to get the timeline straight because I'm really fascinated by this, especially in today's entrepreneurial climate where we have all these young entrepreneurs. They expect to have their, jump right into some venture, have it be amazing, have an exit. But you spent 20 years almost learning business, in this great retail environment at May Company. You could have called your career over, at the end of Payless. You're a president of a major, retailing corporation, Payless Shoe Source. You make some good money. And so how old are you at this time when, you exit Payless?
48.
You're 48 years old, right? And I have this problem all the time. I feel like I'm getting older, and how am I going to come up with a new idea or run a new business or, stay ahead of the kids coming up behind me? And so at 48, you have this vision to do Build-A-Bear. And, one of the things I love about your book is you have this kind of concept of like dreaming the really big dream and having the really big vision. And so from day one, did you have that really, really big vision? And then how did you kind of connect those dots? Because I know so many, we all know the people that have all these great ideas, but really the difference between, having that great idea and that vision is executing and following through with it. And so can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes. But don't think that because I worked for a large company, I wasn't doing entrepreneurial things every single day. I was an entrepreneur. I ran my own multi-million-dollar business from almost the first 6 months I was in the company. And continued to be promoted to run bigger and bigger businesses. And Payless was a $2.5 billion business. So those are entrepreneurial ventures, and you're just doing it with somebody else's money, which gives it, some much level of security. But if you don't produce the results, there's no security there. And I was always coming up with new ideas to make our businesses grow. That's my job as the leader, is to help lead us to the future, not to stay still or be in the past. So May Company retailing encourages the customer always wants something new. They don't want what they had last year. They come into the store for maybe another pink sweater, but because pink is their favorite color, but not the same style of sweater they bought last year. And so you have to constantly be innovating, and that's what made retailing so successful. And that still is what customers come to the store to buy, pretty much something new, because they when they want to buy something like they had before, they can go online and just press the button and buy that size 6 pair of shoes that they always like. But when they want something new, they do want to touch it and feel it. And maybe they'll buy it online and they'll bring it, they'll send it home, and then they'll go back in the store to return it. And that's why we have multi-platform, multi-channel operations today. But I was always an entrepreneur. I didn't necessarily think of myself that way, because entrepreneur usually means somebody who started their own business. But I was allowed to be entrepreneurial. And I think that's a really important skill that we need to be teaching. If we can teach, you may not be able to teach natural entrepreneurs, but you can teach the entrepreneurial mindset. And I think that's really what American business needs today. And we have to be looking at that talent from many, many avenues. There's tons of people with lots of great ideas out there. They may not have access to the money or to the business where they can make that come to life, but we do need to do a better job of connecting young people with talent and ideas to people who can help them execute it, but still give them the credit, give the young people the credit, and make them part of the profitable pie that is going to come forward. So I was 48 years old when I started my own business, but I loved working for the May Company. I had a phenomenal career. I was making great money. I had great benefits. I worked with really smart people. I never thought about opening my own business. I was running my own business. I was held accountable for it every day. And when May Company decided to spin off Payless as a public company, it became an opportunity for me. And I just said, this is a really great time. This is when the internet was just starting. There's a void here. People are missing that connection that they had with their customer. And I wanted to bring that back. And it really did come up because I was just very open-minded to what the future could be for me. And I was out with, I mentioned it earlier, out with my best friend Katie and her little brother Jack, she was 10 and he was like 7. And we were looking for something just very naturally. And that's where the ideas are. They're staring us in the face every day. But not everybody has the skill set to bring it to reality. I did. I had the training to bring a business together. And if I didn't know, I could call somebody on the phone and say, do you know somebody here in town that I could use for my warehousing? And somebody in the May Company would tell me, do you know about what price of rent I should be paying in this mall? They would tell me. And so, I had a lot of connections, and I used those connections to help expand my company's potential.
Yeah. And, one of the things you talk about Katie and Jack, and on a previous episode, we had Jeff Hoffman, who was the founder of Priceline.com. And he talked a lot about looking at the world with wonder through a child's eyes. And you say the same thing about letting a child inspire you. I think, that truly comes from your experience with Katie and Jack. And, and it's really the inspiration for Build-A-Bear Workshop and all this, great joy that you're bringing out to the world. I mean, why is it so important for us to look at the world through a child's eyes like that?
Well, first of all, they're the future. And they have amazing, unjaded thoughts about the world and what they like and what they don't like. And they're not, if you ask them, they'll tell you. Now, a lot of children are, taught in the old days, like, speak when spoken to. But I'm sort of, one of the lucky things for me is I'm about 4'10". So I'm the same height as a lot of kids. And I can, when I'm with them, and of course now that I have Build-A-Bear, when I mention Build-A-Bear, every kid wants to talk to me and tell me the stories of their bears. And I get tons of feedback. But when I was just starting out Build-A-Bear, I still was like that. I have no children of my own, and I was always close. That was by choice. I always was really close to my friends' kids. And we had a special relationship. It's different when you go to spend the night at your friend's house than it is when you're sleeping in your own bed at home. And we would always do fun things. I'm a kid at heart. I'm very creative. I love to make things and do things. And kids love to do that too. So they allowed me to be me. And I think that sometimes we get so caught up in business and politics and organizational structure and family problems, we forget to use our kid think. And I try to inspire kids today that I work with and talk to never lose their kid think.
Yeah. And like, how do we as adults not lose that?
Well, you have to always be creative and curious. I mean, curiosity is really what made the world what it is today. Somebody thought there could be something better, and they invented that better, and that's what we're all prospering from. And when things aren't better, when things are made worse or not protected, they go away. And I think that's one of the things that we're dealing with. So I think kids have all the answers for how we're going to save our planet, how we're going to eliminate racism, how we're going to improve our health. It's all in those kids' heads. They just don't know it yet. We have to put them in environments where they're allowed to just talk out loud and say what's on their mind, and things come out. And then people that are listening to them have to listen with open ears. So, you might hear something on Monday and it doesn't make a lot of sense. It sounds kind of wild, but by Wednesday, 2 other people have told you something about that. You click, it clicks into your head and you say, that's a trend, or that's an idea. And some of them turn out to be fads. They come and they go, but other things have a longer potential. The other thing is I was always willing to share. If you don't put your ideas out there, other people can't add value to them. They also maybe can't steal them, but more importantly, they can't add value to them. And I was never afraid of that. People can't steal what's in your heart. They maybe can take some of your ideas that they see in the public domain, but they can't steal what's in your heart. And that really was what I knew I was creating, was a company with heart that would care about its associates, it would care about its customers, it would contribute back to the community. I didn't need more. I had a successful career, as you said. My husband and I both had enough. It wasn't that we wanted more. We wanted to be able to do more for the good of the world and the community. And that was really what Build-A-Bear was meant to be for us, was an opportunity for us, if it was successful, which I knew it would be because kids told me it would be, to monetize that investment and bring other people to the table to also invest with us and share in the success of the company, including our associates. And that I worked for a company like that. The May Company was a tremendous company to work for. I almost always made my bonus. I always was, put it in the bank, and it grew and grew and grew. And that money was able to help me start Build-A-Bear. So they had great benefits. They took care of their associates, and I remember my insurance at one time was $1 a month. It was pretty good. But we had great training programs. They were sending you to allowing you to grow and learn and contribute. And so I never had any complaints about that. I was really a lucky duck in that respect. I walked into a great company to work for, and I got great results, and they gave it back to me 100 times over.
And I love that. People can't steal what's in your heart. And I'm really, taking that to heart. And so, I think that, thank you for sharing that. And, going back to Build-A-Bear in that first store at the Galleria in St. Louis, I mean, what did that look like compared to kind of the stores today? I mean, what were some of the key components that, you brought in that instantly resonated? I mean, were things like the coloring book style box and things like that? Were those, key
Yes.
components of the store?
Yes, the store is very much like it is today. One thing that's different, pretty substantially different actually, is I thought that we had 25 animals and we had about 12 outfits. We had no shoes at that time. I'd just come from the shoe business, so I didn't really want to get back in the shoe business. And bears didn't really need shoes. They could go barefoot, of course. So, but we had some other, we had greeting cards, we had gift wrap, anything that had teddy bears on it, I brought into this first store. And it all sold, but we needed room for more customers. The lines were out the door. We had to rethink our store really quickly, because we opened on October 26, 1997, and we were coming into the Christmas season. And by Christmas, the lines were out the door. So right after Christmas was over, little did I know that Valentine's was going to be such a big holiday also. And that January was going to be so big because kids got their gift cards, or in those days we used gift certificates, and they were coming in to make their bears. And so we never really had returns. We just had tons of customers in line waiting to get in. And so we had to close the store for a weekend so we could take out all that stuff and put in more fixtures for more bears, and put in more registers, and put in more Name Me computers so more kids could sit down and name their bear. We only had 2 of those. We had 2 registers, and we had a lot of fixture space that was for things that were tertiary to our business. So we really adjusted very, very quickly. And as we learned new things in each store, we went backwards and retrofitted the other stores to be the format of the store that we were going. Now, you don't know this, but maybe that you read that in the book. In the very first stores, we actually sewed up every bear in the back. We had people that sat there, and after you stuffed your bear, we had needles and thread, and people actually sewed them up. So our productivity was limited by the number of people. Sometimes we had 13, 14 people sitting in chairs sewing up bears because that was the bottleneck in our store. And right after the first of the year, we hired a consultant to come in and help us with our bottlenecks because we knew that we couldn't do this. And we actually invented a system for pre-lacing the bears in China where we were making them, that we could just pull the stitching. But as soon as we were doing that, somebody else was filing a similar patent. So we ended up buying that patent from them instead of trying to patent our own. We ended up buying the patent for them. It was expensive at the time, very, very expensive. But when you think about all the bears we've sold, it's been, a huge payback. But luckily for me, I had the financial wherewithal to do that. I had investors by then, and they trusted me to know what were the right thing to do for the business. So we were constantly innovating and responding to the business that we had and making our future stores a little bit bigger, better traffic flow. And we'd go back and we'd update the first 15 stores that we'd already made. And by store 15 or 20, 50, we had it pretty much figured out. And it was just more about changing the animals and changing the outfits and the fashion of the business versus the operations of the store. The box was definitely there from the very beginning. This is a cute story. It's a true story. I always admired McDonald's and their Happy Meal. But when we were working on our bears for distribution, the Chinese manufacturer had come to town and he loved bagels. And so he stopped at Einstein Bagels and brought in a big tote box of the bagels into the office. And they were sitting on the counter on our table that we were working at. And the box was there. And there was a bear sort of leaning up against the box. And it just dawned on me that should be the carrier for our bears. It was a bigger box. We made a bigger box and we decorated it. But that it would be a house for the bears and kids could decorate it. And so very quickly, our marketing firm redesigned it and got it going for us, and we developed the artwork and we produced those boxes to be part of and the price of that box was built into the retail price of our bears. So the birth certificate was from the beginning. Little did I didn't know this either. I mean, we just sort of thought about it when I realized that I lost my teddy bear and Katie almost lost her teddy bear. We came up with this system, and the person who was running our POS system, the company that was making our POS system, the salesman was so excited about our idea. I was trying to figure out how we could create this barcode that we would be able to identify every single bear. And he actually helped me do that. And he said, you just need a really simple system, and you just tear it off and put half of in the bear. And then the customer registers it in this birth certificate system that you have. Because I was the merchandise manager when we had Cabbage Patch. The dolls were really popular in the discount store business. And they all had a birth certificate. I don't know if you remember that, but they all had a birth certificate with their name on it. And so you could, kids love that. I know that mothers and fathers and everybody was coming in to buy Cabbage Patch Kids. So we created that for our bears too. And you could name your own bear. And I remember when I was telling Katie this, that we're going to come up with names for the bears, and then that would go on the birth certificate. She said, you can't name the bears. I wouldn't want anybody to name George, or some other name. He was George. I named him George. Well, she didn't really name him George because she was a baby when she got him, but the person who gave it to her was named George. So George just became the name of the bear, but I know she felt she named him. And so we let every child name their bear, and 176 million bears have been named and put into our computers, and we know where all of them live.
I love just hearing the origin of all the inspiration and how all these things came to be. And I'll connect that whenever I'm in the mall and I see Build-A-Bear. But I don't know why do you know what the most common Build-A-Bear name is after 176 million?
It depends on, so it's so much about fashion. So when I just remember this, when Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa were battling for the home run king that summer, I think it was 1999 or 98. The most popular bear in Chicago was Sammy, and the most popular bear in St. Louis was Mac or McGuire or Mark. I mean, it goes with whatever what's going on. Kids are very sensitive to news and trends, and so we see that a lot. Teddy was common, but then there was Amanda and Mary. There's no common really name, but a lot of times when we have licensed animals, like for Star Wars, the kids name it what the name is of the animal. So that one isn't as creative as sometimes Chewbacca's wearing something really funny and cute, like a bride's dress or something, but his name is still Chewie in the computer. The kids still name him. So there's no real, it just depends on the child and or if it's a boyfriend making a bear for his girlfriend, or a girlfriend making it for a boyfriend, or somebody making it for a friend in the hospital. There's no common name anymore, and there never was really. It just depended on the trends in the marketplace.
I love it. It's like the Build-A-Bear cultural index, pop culture index,
Yeah.
and you can check that out. So just to give like a little bit of context, like, you mentioned you went from the one store in St. Louis to 15. Like, how quickly, what was the growth trajectory of Build-A-Bear, and how quickly did you grow, and what was that like?
It was fast. The first year we had one store in October. By the next October we had four total stores, and the next October we had 15 stores, and then we added about 25 stores a year, 25 to 35 a year. By the time we went public in 2004, we had, I think, almost 175, 150 stores, and then we grew to 300 stores, and then 350, and right now around the world there's about 400 stores.
And so,
but most of that growth came in the first 10 years.
Okay. Yeah. And, so you were going through that, and it sounds like you had a ton of success, and, certainly we're given the Cliff Notes version here, but like, what was the hard part about it? What was hard for you during that time?
Well, I had investors, and, we went through a couple of stages where people wanted to take the company public earlier than I thought the company was ready. We had to, kind of figure that out together. And we did. I had great investors. We had up and down economic times, and the most recent one, the economic recession in 2008 and 9, and was devastating. It was really hard, and it was the beginning of the change in the mall business, because at the same time in 2007, gas prices went up to like $2.50 a gallon, and people were coming to the mall less, and they had other options, and the internet was becoming much more accessible. Women were not afraid to shop. It was way easy. And stores had websites. You could have, even if you didn't live in a city with Nordstrom's, you could buy on Nordstrom. So, of course, Amazon becoming so much more pervasive, grocery shopping, all of these things that didn't start out so great were getting better and better and better, and people were able to use them. So it wasn't just the recession that impacted mall business so greatly, but it was the recession along with the ease of buying and shopping online. And Build-A-Bear it's different for us because while we have a website, and we always have had, children don't shop on the web, especially small children. And so mom has to drive you to the mall. I know for a fact that if kids could come every day, they would. But mom doesn't do that. And she doesn't come to the mall with her children as often as she did. She comes for Build-A-Bear. Build-A-Bear is definitely a destination, but it's not someplace that she goes 6 times a year. But she might have gone to the mall 6 to 12 times a year. And she might have brought her kids at least 50% of the time, but now she may not come to the mall that often. And so we have to deal with that change in mall traffic. But we're up to it, and we've adjusted our store size accordingly, and we've closed some stores. After the recession, it became kind of clear where some of the best locations were and where they weren't. But Build-A-Bear is an important member of the mall community, because when a customer comes to the mall to come to Build-A-Bear, they stay for about over an hour in the mall. And that's good for the malls. And when they bring children, that means they're going to go probably stop at the food court, and they're going to do something else besides coming to Build-A-Bear. So we're a very important tenant, and the landlords have all been great to us. In fact, they were incredibly wonderful investors in Build-A-Bear in their own way, because they wanted us to come so badly. They would pay for our stores to be built out and made sure they had the latest and greatest Build-A-Bear store. So they were great partners with us in the development of Build-A-Bear, and they've been great partners in the last 10 years as well, with even the challenges to retail, because they want us to be successful.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to think about. I remember being a child, like literally living at the mall, first with my mother, then, with my friends. And then, it was really a big part of my life. And you're absolutely right. I mean, you would go and, we'd have to go do school shopping and do that whole thing where mom is trying on all the, clothes. And then you go, oh, there's a Build-A-Bear or whatever. Right. And so I can really see how that can change things. And so, you started Build-A-Bear, had amazing growth. It's doing great. And at a certain point, you decide to leave the company. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's good. This is an exciting story, actually. I really, again, influenced by another 10-year-old. I was visiting, I started Build-A-Bear. I was 48 years old, and I knew that I wasn't going to do it forever. I knew that I had a lot of things else that I wanted to do in life, and I needed to get on with it. But then we hit the recession, and I was actually staying longer. And then a person that I thought was going to be my heir apparent did not work out. So I just kept moving along. And I was at a local school in North St. Louis, which is a very poor area. And I always go to talk to kids. And that day, this little girl stood up. This is the short story of this. Her name was Tia, and she was 10 years old, and she was in the 5th grade. And she said, "Miss Clark, do you believe that all children's dreams come true?" And I said, "Yes, Tia, I do. What's your dream?" And she said, "My dream is to find the sun, S-U-N." And of course, I thought I was talking to a future Bill Gates, because I grew up in Florida. I saw the sun every day. I never thought twice about it. But this little girl was asking about the sun, and I took it literally. I said to her, "Tia, I think that's a great dream. And when I want to find something or do something, I go and study it." So we could go to the library, and I could introduce you to my friend who's a weathercaster, and we could go to Washington University and see the Mars rover and talk to people about the sun. And I was really enthralled with my answers here. And by the time, she asked this question, and all the kids started laughing at her. And I realized that she probably was this child that asked a lot of provocative questions. And so when I was done, when I finished, realized I was out of my field here. I needed to stop talking about science and get back to bears. All the kids had stopped laughing. And every question after that was about science. And I realized what really happened there was that they were asking me things because they wanted to be acknowledged, and they wanted to be smart like Tia. And so I left there, and I was feeling like this amazing feeling of power, not power in a negative way, but opportunity to influence. I called my husband and I said, "There's more for me to do here. I've got to get on with it." And he said, "We better figure it out, because you're it." And I later, by holiday, was talking to the board, and we decided that they would look for that has to be the board decision to look for the successor. And by the following June, we had somebody, and I retired in August. And though I'm still on the board and I'm still a large investor, I don't get involved in the day-to-day, and I'm really have the time to do and the financial wherewithal to make a huge difference in my community, inspired by Tia. So it's just interesting that they were both 10-year-old girls, one from a very affluent neighborhood and one from one not so very affluent. And they both had a life-changing impact on me. And they're both about my height too. But so we saw eye to eye on things. But that is just a true story. And last year I went to see Tia. Now she's in the 11th grade, but she was in the 10th grade. And I went to see her to tell her how much impact she had on me. And she said, "Miss Clark, I didn't mean that. That's not what I was talking about." I said, "I know it wasn't. I know that what you asked me was different. But when I thought about your question and I took it really seriously, it made me think about my own son. Had I found my son yet? And you helped me think about it. And I still am, reaching for that sun and the moon and the stars. And I really appreciate what you did. I just wanted you to know that." So, and we forget to do that too. We get ideas come to us from different ways, but we don't always say thank you.
Yeah. And it's like, depending on where you are in your life, you either need to be seeking out more 10-year-old girls or steering clear, because they have profound changes in your trajectory.
So ideas come from so many places. And I now spend my time with young people and their ideas, helping them take their ideas to the next level. So I work in an organization called the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, and I'm working a lot on college campuses in entrepreneurship. I work in our city, and I mentor a lot of women and minorities. I've been a small investor, and that's mostly what people need. Is they need the right advice. And I got it. Remember, I told you I worked in the May company. I could call up anybody I knew there. But many of these young people, they don't have that network yet. And so I try to be that network as best I can. But it gives me more than it gives them, quite frankly. I get to hear their deep, dark secrets, their great ideas, and it keeps me in shape, so to speak, what's going on in the world. And I am on the board of Build-A-Bear, and I'm on the board of Foot Locker, and I'm on the board of PBS and other nonprofits. But all of those things together have a lot in common. They're just really generating future entrepreneurs. And that's really what I think our country needs. It doesn't mean that, to me, an entrepreneur is a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, a gardener in his own business. It doesn't have to be that you're, Mark Zuckerberg. Yeah, it doesn't have to be that level. In fact, I believe the future of our economy is going to be built on many, many millions of small business owners and inventors that come up with great products at the moment, and then the next one and the next one after that. We won't see as many gigantic companies as we've seen in the past, but lots of small ones that help fuel our communities around the country.
Yeah, and, when we sat together the first time, I mean, that's what really struck me about meeting you was just how passionate and dedicated you were to your own local community,
Mhm.
and St. Louis, and what you're doing there. I mean, do you want to talk specifically about any of the projects you're working on there right now?
Sure. Well, they're so varied. People think, how do you do all these things? But they're all related. They're all about, building on the history of our community, building on what was once here and making it better. And so my next big project, I've been working on it for 3 years, is called the Delmar Divine. It is the reimagination of an old hospital that closed about 6 years ago or 7 years ago and has been lying dormant. It was first built in 1904 and had been expanded up until 1965 and then closed because it wasn't in a part of town where they really wanted to be for the future. And they put some things in there, some smaller hospitals used the space, but anyway, it's in a really critical neighborhood, and it's on the street called Delmar in St. Louis, which divides rich and poor, black and white. And I want to be part of that transformation, so in the future generations won't know about that divide. They'll only know about the divine. And so we've been working on this. It's a complicated project because it's a 500,000 square feet. I say it's the half a mall size. I speak in mall terms, but it's going to be a unique working space for nonprofits and apartments for teachers, nurses, social workers, public health workers, public safety, those people that make that 35 to 55,000 and still a lot of them have to live at home because it's too expensive to live. And we're creating these fabulous school apartments, and it's really in a great neighborhood, actually. It's between Washington University undergraduate campus and the medical school campus in a once very vibrant neighborhood. But there's vibrant neighborhoods to our east and to our west. And we're the bridge that will bridge the two together and then bridge north so that, 25 years from now, no one will remember that they used to call it the divide and it separated our community. It will be all working together. And I do a lot of things around that bring us together, that will either be tenants or be businesses in the neighborhood of the Delmar Divine. So I'm working on creating opportunities for people who live in the community and to invest in this project with their own businesses and also with their own nonprofits. So it's coming together. It's going to open up in 2020. So it's a major undertaking, but most malls, that's how long they took too. So I'm just more impatient because I had the idea for Build-A-Bear in January and opened it up in October. So that was much faster. And while I raised the same amount of money for Build-A-Bear that I have to raise for this project, ultimately, I have to do this one more upfront, and that one I had to do along the way. So it takes a little bit longer to do that. And it's in a part of town that not all St. Louisans, think is worthy of this kind of redevelopment, but I do. And I'm going to show them that I'm right. Just like I did with Build-A-Bear. The same adult said, oh, that'll never work. So I think that it takes, somebody who just doesn't take no for an answer. In fact, no makes me go harder in this particular project because it once was a very vibrant neighborhood and it could be that again. And I love history. I'm from Miami and there wasn't really art. Most of the houses in my neighborhood were all relatively new. These are really historic homes, beautiful, beautiful churches in the neighborhood. St. Louis had a really wonderful history. And as people moved out of the city into the suburbs, they abandoned some of these most beautiful buildings and these neighborhoods. And so we have a lot of good choices to resurrect and renovate and reimagine.
So ambitious and so incredible. And the city of St. Louis is certainly lucky to have you and your husband and all the work you guys are doing there. And again, that's what really struck me about, meeting you is just how proud you are to be from St. Louis and committed to saying like, this is my home and we're really going to make it something special for the future. And so there's no doubt in my mind that your legacy is going to live on through those actions and like the children like Tia that you've affected. As we get to the end here, Maxine, I have two final questions. And the first is, I know that you look at Build-A-Bear and you really think that and see it as, and I agree with you, that it was a great combination of marketing and PR and branding and really strong brand recognition. And you're a great brand builder. What did you love about brand building at Build-A-Bear?
Well, I just believe that, if you think of, make it as big as it can be or as good as it can be. It doesn't necessarily cost more. Like, I remember one of my advisors, my friends, I showed him the box and he said, what do you want to spend the money on that for? Just get a bag. And when I was pricing bags and pricing the box was actually cheaper. So a lot of times we think that things that look better cost more, but they don't always cost more. In fact, they might cost less. And that was a really good lesson for me. It's sort of our Cub condo, the box that the bear goes home in. It's like our Tiffany blue box. And I all the things that I loved about places that I shopped that I kept in my head, that I took pictures of, that I didn't used to have in my phone because we didn't have phone pictures, but I still remember them clearly. I put into Build-A-Bear, and I knew that if I to make it successful, I had to put all my good ideas in. And if that didn't work, then I was, out of luck. And then I at least put everything in there. But if I had just said, no, we can't afford this, we can't afford that, I wouldn't have known what to put in if it wasn't successful. So that's how I look at it. And I wanted customers to feel like it wasn't a local teddy bear toy store. It was a national company. I remember working behind the register in the first weeks that we were open, even the first few months, because this is owned by Disney, or this is Warner Brothers, or, that people didn't know that it was a local owner. And that just made me kind of laugh inside, because I wanted it to be that. I wanted them to think that this was something really cool and really special. And I wanted the people that worked there to be proud of the brand that they were working for and always set a good example for it. And so I want the same for the young people that I work with in our communities too. I want them to see that every brand that we put in front of them, everything that I'm asking them to invest in or to work on or to engage with is really very upscale, very aspirational, because they deserve that. I don't chintz, I figure out I sort of say, I look for the Bentley and then I figure out how to do it on a Ford budget. But first, when it's in your head and you want to do it and everybody deserves that. And we've had great examples in front of us. I mean, look at Nike and the branding that they've done. Look at Starbucks, look at McDonald's. I mean, there's great branding out there. And I want to Build-A-Bear to stand amongst those brands as one that, if it went away, people would really miss it.
Yeah, and I'm sure they would today, right? Like there'd be outrage if Build-A-Bear bit away. Yeah, I think my kids would not be too happy.
And I wanted everybody that worked there to be really proud of the company that they worked for. To when they walked in every day, to be just so happy. And I think that really is. It's one of the best companies to work for in America, and I'm really proud of that. And I'm proud that it's continued all these years after I left as well.
So Maxine, what would the 20-year-old say to you if they ran into you today?
The 20-year-old me?
Yeah.
Well, I was very impatient, so I did learn some patience as I got older. So they would probably tell me to keep going, keep on keeping on, because I was, I just wanted to do everything. My future was in front of me, but I would tell somebody looking back that, be a little bit more patient. You don't have to do everything up front, that there's lots of arcs in your life, and you can even start a business at 48 years old. You don't have to rush it all into your 20s. You can spread it out over a much longer lifetime than I'll even have. And to constantly be learning, to not think that you have to go this route or that route and stay on that route, that you can be flexible, and that learn to apply your skills in one thing to something else. Sometimes it's adapting your resume, but not necessarily the printed resume, but your own skills. What did you learn in that job? I look at so many basic resumes that people send me, and I say, what did you do? How many projects did you work on? You're project manager. What does that mean? How many projects did you work on? What were the most successful? Tell about that in your resume. And I have a great story to tell. I mean, I really lived a great business life working for a large, wonderful corporation, and I was able to use that to apply to my own business, and I've applied it to the boards that I'm on and the nonprofit work that I'm doing now. It's all just building on that incredible history. I hate to think of it as history because it makes me sound old, but it was in fact a significant amount of time that I've been working in the work world, and it feels like yesterday. So I had a lot more time than I thought.
And that is Maxine Clark and Build-A-Bear Workshop. What really struck me about this conversation with Maxine is that it's all about the totality of your life and your career. And there's always so much more of your story to be written. We are never done creating and building and shaping the world around us. Maxine Clark is one of the true innovators in the retail industry. And while she has passed the torch to the next generation of leadership at Build-A-Bear, her legacy lives on. And today there are more than 400 Build-A-Bear Workshop stores worldwide, and they have created over 160 million furry friends and countless more smiles. It's a lot of love out there in the world. Build-A-Bear is where you go to create lasting memories. Talk about putting positivity out into the world for all of us. Well, that's our show for today. Thanks for listening. Until next time. Make sure to visit our website, www.wildstory.com, where you can subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS, so you'll never miss an episode.
I like big stories and I cannot lie. You other storytellers can't deny. Baby got backstory.
You'll also find free story downloads and resources to help you integrate the power of story into your business.